Hello and welcome, I am Dashbubble, and this is how you can detect if a chunk is loaded in Bedrock Edition. Now, you might want this if you're building something like Silent Whisperer's Charged Creeper Wither Skeleton farm. So imagine this is the farm, and if you have a portal that's linked too far away, say like by this armor stand, then when you go from the nether back to the overworld to kill your wither skeletons will be outside of the mob spawning radius, and they'll despawn before you get a chance to blow them up with a charged creeper. And in order to counteract this, if you go through a portal that will link to the kill chamber portal, then you'll be stuck with all of the wither skeletons. But if there's a way to detect when the chunk is loaded, then you can trigger an ender pearl stasis chamber to get yourself out, hopefully taking minimal damage from the wither skeletons while simultaneously keeping them loaded. So that's an example where you might want this. I'm going to go delete this right now because we don't need this. Now you might have seen a setup something like this in Java Edition, where you have an armor stand with Frostwalker boots next to water, and when the chunk is loaded, the water will freeze and an observer can see that. Unfortunately for us in Bedrock, this will not freeze the water, so we need to find an alternative way to detect if the chunk is loaded. We can copy this idea somewhat using a system like this, where the player freezes the water, and then you leave here and you can have a lamp above to melt the ice once it's frozen and an observer to detect that change. And you can turn on the lamp from, more than your simulation distance away. And then when you come into simulation distance, the ice will start to melt and you can trigger your ender pearl stasis chamber or whatever you want to do. Now, obviously the ender pearl stasis chamber uses water, so that can't be in the nether, but we can come up with a system to detect if a chunk is loaded in the nether as well, doing something like this. So in this system, what I have is a dropper with an item in it, and when we trigger it, the dropper will send the item up over to this ice. It will float across the ice and fall into the drip leaf. When the state of the drip leaf changes, this observer will get triggered and we can trigger the trapdoor. So I'll throw my ender pearl back again. So it's basically this loop. Item goes up, falls over, triggers the drip leaf, observer sees it, and you can do whatever you want with that signal. Now, so I've tested this a little bit. So my simulation distance is set to 4, and if you don't know what your simulation distance is, it's probably 4. So in this chunk right here, I am 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chunks away from this little contraption I have set up to detect when the chunk is loaded. So if I trigger that from here, one thing, well, I also want to point this out. So I have a redstone signal sending itself all the way back to me, because I think this is an interesting observation. When I trigger this, the redstone signal makes it all the way over here. But you'll notice that when I load the chunk in renders distance, there's no stick here to trigger the drip leaf. And we can see it's still in the dropper. Also, this copper bulb did not change state. If, however, we come back to where we were before, but instead of standing in this chunk when we trigger it, we stand in this chunk. So now it's only 4 chunks away, and therefore in my simulation distance, I can trigger it now, and in a second, I'll teleport. And what we can do with this is, we'll set the system up again. We can come back over here, and we can trigger the system from within this chunk, but move over to a chunk which unloads the entities 5 chunks over now. And now, say we have a portal here, we go into the nether, we go AFK our farm, we can come back through a portal that will link to the kill chamber, and as soon as we log in to the overworld, we'll get teleported to our ender pearl stasis chamber. So I think that's a pretty neat way of doing it. I think there's probably room for improvement, but this is just what I have. So again, the system is dropper into glass elevator, item ejects over ice onto drip leaf, and we have an observer observing those changes. And then you can use that signal to do whatever you want. Obviously, this will trigger so I'll just throw an item on here for now. 1, 2, 3. It'll trigger 3 times, and then the drip leaf will go back up, and it will trigger a 4th time. So maybe you want a way to only get 1 signal out of it, but if you're doing an interval stasis chamber, it's fine because you can just wait for it to finish and then reset everything. Just like so. Oops. So, yeah. I hope this is helpful for whatever contraption you decide to build. There are a couple other mechanics that I'm going to be making videos about because I think there's room to push Redstone forward more in Bedrock Edition. Obviously, there are a lot of Redstoners for Java Edition, but there are a couple other mechanics that I want to show off in a few future videos, so keep an eye out for those. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.